Welcome, good afternoon. LA Stage Day is well underway. My name is Paul Vandeventer. I run an organization here in Los Angeles called Community Partners. Community Partners innovates civic, social, and cultural initiatives in the region. We've been around for 23 years. We have an annual budget approaching $30 million. We, when you see a new group emerge, might have had a hand in incubating that, whether it be in the arts, health, education, after-school programs, or major public policy initiatives like Move LA, which is going to change the transit face of Los Angeles, and move people around in ways that get them to arts venues more conveniently. I've been in this world nonprofit organizations since the 1980s when I was program officer and executive vice president of the California Community Foundation. We started Community Partners in 1992 with our first project, and it's been a ride ever since. I am delighted to be moderating this panel. We have an intimate enough group of people here where we can actually have a conversation, which I think is terrific. Many of you, I think, want to engage with Ben over there after his talk this morning on change. It wouldn't have anything to do with the fact that he runs a $13 million grant-making program at the Duke Foundation. But, you know, he did tell me that he was a deputy sheriff, not a program officer. Which made us cool. So let me just introduce the topic today. This is a panel on the engaged board member that has a ring of marriage to it. To be engaged with anything suggests a kind of connectivity, and to be involved in a nonprofit organization as a board member is more than a transaction. It's actually a transformative role for the organization. And critically important, not just under law, but under kind of that moral ethos of a nonprofit is a community organization. And a board, in many ways, extends an organization into the community and brings the community into the organization. So in marriage is a marriage to a mission, if you want to think about it in that way. And marriage might also have to do with the passion of a board member for a particular art form, and a way of giving into that art form is to stand in service by serving as a member of a board of directors. Let me ask you, how many of you sit on boards of directors of organizations? Great. So we have people who are stewards and people who have kind of taken the engagement role and experienced it in various ways. How many of you serve boards as an executive? Okay. And how many of you aspire to more board service in the future, better board service, and new organizations that are at the cutting edge or deep in the traditions of the arts? Right here, because you're a very engaged group of people, which is terrific. Let me introduce your experience council this morning. This is not a panel, this is a group of people with a certain kind of expertise that rose out of years of experience, and I would argue that there are many in this room who could just switch places in the chairs here and engage in equally stimulating conversation to the one we're about to have, because your experience translates in many ways that you're going to hear these people talk about today. The way I run these panels sometimes is to try and get as much conversation going as quickly as possible. I like to prime the board, prime the panel with a few questions that give you a sense of how they think and what they think about, and what prompts them to engage with the particular subject at hand. That's how we'll handle it today. But before I do that, you need to know who is sitting here. You've already been introduced to one of them, but to my immediate left, Charmaine Jefferson, legendary in Los Angeles, a native Angelino. Spent 8 years as a professional concert dancer before pirouetting to law and arts administration, a strange pirouette indeed. She served as a senior dance program specialist for the National Endowment for the Arts, a civil litigator, executive director of Dance Theater of Harlem, deputy and acting commissioner of New York City's Department of Cultural Affairs. She's seen the government angle of this and the funding from that side of things. Vice President of Business Affairs for De Passe Entertainment and a Director of Show Development for Disney Entertainment Productions. What I didn't mention, and many of you know her from, is that for 11 years she headed the California African American Museum in Los Angeles and serves on the boards of Arts for LA and the California Institute of the Arts. Did I get that all right?
Yes,
Okay.
and Vice Chair of the LA Cultural Affairs Commission.
Terrific. More immediately so. Please welcome Charmaine. Next to Charmaine's left is Kiki Ramos Gindler. Kiki joined the Center Theater Group Board of Directors in 2012. Last February, she was elected board president, and in that role, she chairs the executive committee and serves as a member of all board committees, which makes that a full-time job. She's a lawyer by training, which gives her patience, and she's widely connected nationally to the world of performing arts, small theater, large theater, the Los Angeles Philharmonic, and the National Council for the American Theater. Welcome, Kiki Ramos. Our next panelist you heard from, he's already been introduced once, but I'll just remind you that he's currently program director for the arts at the Doris Duke Charitable Foundation in New York and supervises what is today about a $15 million grant-making program in jazz, dance, and the presenting fields of theater and other presenting arts. A regular speaker at arts events internationally, he served on several nonprofit boards and serves a board in the role that he currently occupies, including the boards of the National Arts and Business Council, American Arts Alliance, and Grantmakers in the Arts. He also, I learned from reading his little TED bio, has served for the last 13 seasons as a quiz panelist for Live at the Metropolitan Opera. Being an expert on opera as well, for any of you who have questions along those lines. Handed you a copy of an article that I don't want you to reference right now. I just want you to read it later on, because it summarized some of my thinking when it comes to boards. And I would argue just one simple fact, that board membership is a three-legged stool. The first leg is governance. Under the law, we govern nonprofit organizations through volunteer board of directors. Second role, fundraising, linking the enterprise with the funding to make the enterprise occur. And third, and this is what the article is about, is civic reach, bringing the community into the arts organization and the arts organization out into the community. You may agree or disagree that those are important legs of the stool. We'll explore that a little bit today. But I have an opening question that I ask each panelist to think about, and it's this. Give me an instance or an insight that served you as a catalyst in your understanding and valuing of boards of directors in whatever relationship you have or had with them in that instance. And I'm going to start with Ben, who, when I asked him this question, went, yes, I know what I want to know. So if you'll start.
Yeah, I'm happy to. And let me just begin by saying, those of you that serve on boards, I want to genuflect in your presence. It's really, I'm always struck that, especially for those of you that aren't in this business for a living, that you give your time and your energy and your counsel and your resources to the people that work in this business. is a statement of commitment that we're all deeply appreciative for. And so thank you for being on board, those of you who are. The thing that came instantly to mind, actually, because I get to meet with a lot of boards and observe a lot of boards, is actually a story about the board of directors at Steppenwolf Theater. And I have to tip my hat to their great outgoing executive director, an actor named Martha Levy. Martha basically said to the board for about a year or a year and a half, she shared with them a document that some of you may know called Good to Great in the Social Sector. There's a corporate Bible called Good to Great, which some of you may know, which is about what's the difference between a good corporation and a great corporation. That author, whose name is Jim Collins, wrote a subsequent article saying that corporate Bible unfortunately can be used to bludgeon nonprofits about things because it's not easily transferable. But here's a way to think about it for the nonprofit, hence Good to Great and the social sector, which is a separate article. So Martha sat down with the board and said basically, for a year to a year and a half, I just want us to answer one question, or two questions. First question is, what would a great Steppenwolf look like? And the second question is, and what difference would it make? And to whom? And for a year and a half, that board struggled with that question. And they came out on the far side of that question with a very clear image that every person at Steppenwolf is right in the middle of. That Steppenwolf sees itself as being the public square where difficult ideas are debated and shared with people who don't know each other. That's what their image is of what they exist to do. And what they first said is, we're going to live that every minute. So we believe this is true. There are talkbacks after every show, not some shows. We're publishing this. We're going to make partnerships with unexpected people, etc. And what that has meant to that board is that board now sees their job not as oversight. They see their role as being champions for greatness. Because that board believes that if we know what a great Steppenwolf would mean, we know what it looks like, and we know that if we do this work, Chicago is going to be a more tolerant, a more inclusive, a less hate crime-ridden city. We will transform this city. And that board now, they're budgeting in 3, 4, and 5-year arcs. They basically are quick to leap. When the library system said to them, we should build it together, you're about ideas, we're about ideas, there was not long agony. They were like, bingo, we are right on the same page. They were the first to say when, some of you may know a thing called It Gets Better, and then the wake of the Matthew Shepard thing, when people were generating their videos, Steppenwolf was one of the first to say, we should be making the studio space and producing the videos for anybody that wants to do it, because that's our job. There's a clarity and a passion and a commitment that has that board on fire. And when you go to the meetings, the stuff that's oversight happens in 5 or 10 minutes. The stuff that's insight and foresight to the journey of greatness is what consumes that board. And what you find is the more that board is upstream in terms of foresight and insight, the greater the resources they're providing without having to be pitched for it, but the more evangelical they are, because they see their job not about producing plays, they see their job as being great and transforming Chicago.
So what would a great organization look like, and what difference would it make? A moment of insight from Steppenwolf. Kiki, let me ask you next to respond to the same question. What insight or instance crystallizes your valuing and understanding of boards?
I have a completely different story. My story is, it sounds like that I got the sense from hearing the Steppenwolf people, and I know that's a very, very high functioning board. And with the right, great leadership, you can take a high functioning board to this vast height of wonderfulness. Another situation is the LA Philharmonic, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. They're right now arguably one of the premier performing arts organizations in the United States, if not the world. About 14 years ago, they were running structural deficits of $2 million a year. They were known as a fine local symphony. They had a board that was comprised of a kind of a different, diverse set of people. Some were high functioning, some not so much. So what happened was, and here's the critical core of the same kind of experience with Steppenwolf and LA Phil, is that there were high functioning leaders on that board who realized they had to start asking big generative questions about what does this organization want to be? And so part of that, for them, was a realization that the board that they had then was not the board that they needed to survive into the next 100 years. So what they did is a handful of board leaders decided and embarked upon a plan to build a new, different board. They also targeted Deborah Borda to hire. They did not do a search firm. They asked to be the premier symphony of this country, who do we need to hire? And they did the research, and they found Deborah Borda. And then that third piece of getting strong staff leadership together with a board with a mission to take the organization to the next level, they were able then to become the organization they are today. And so my takeaway from that story is that board members really do make a profound difference on an organization, but you have to have the commitment, but most importantly, as Ben said, you have to ask the right big picture generative questions.
And maybe one of the questions in your minds as a result of what Kiki just talked about is what triggers that transitional moment so that it becomes a transformative opportunity. And I would urge you to just to kind of ponder that question a little bit as we hear from Charmaine, and an example of an instance or an insight that crystallized your valuing and or understanding of boards.
You know, this is amazing. There is a rarity when I am actually stumped. And I find myself stumped because the range of what an organization can be and can be as huge and large as the LA Phil to as small as Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland saying, let's put on a show. And every one of them has to have a board of directors. And so two things come to my mind about when I have most found myself valuing boards versus thinking, oh my God, I have to deal with my board. And this is me talking as an executive director and having served as the treasurer and on the board of Jacob's Pillow and on the board of many other arts organizations, as well as having served as an ED. So those of you who are in both roles, as I just said, is kind of a cross between Christ and the Antichrist. It just depends on what you do and what you inherit. If you're the ED, what you inherit if you come in as the ED. So I just think of two quick instances, one of which was when I went onto the board of Jacob's Pillow. I went on particularly because of my background and expertise and what I could bring to Jacob's Pillow. Those who don't know, it's in Massachusetts, in the Berkshires, etc. Extraordinary place. And the gentleman who was the chairman, a man named Morton Levy, was in the toy business. And when I first started going to those board meetings, what fascinated me was the commitment of all the people engaged in that organization, in the mission of that organization. It wasn't just a social thing, I want to be here. They actually believed in what the organization was there to do. They believed in what they were willing to give their time, they were willing to give phone calls and etc. And everyone didn't have the same level of wealth, which was a real big issue, big difference sometimes. And yet no one was made to feel like they were less than because they didn't have as much money as this other person. That sort of community camaraderie that kind of happens in the Berkshires lived in the Jacob's Pillow Summer Festival. And that was a moment when I really valued not only being a board member, but seeing as an ED what it would also be like to be in that. On the flip side was when I went to Dance State of Harlem, and as one of the few organizations of color that actually at the time had access to money. And I'll try not to let this be a broken record when I talk, but there is a huge, huge difference between board members with resources and those without. Board members who are passionate and giving and volunteering their time, I love them. They energize me. I call them up. I want to brainstorm with them because they're ready to give over a resource that I know is almost more valuable than money. Because some of the same kinds of organizations we've talked about there's a deficit where someone's gonna write a check. But those organizations didn't have it. So when I first went to Dance City Parliament, I was there twice, once as general manager, then cultural affairs, and went back to build their building as executive director. But the first time I was there, on their board then was Mrs. Peabody, Irene Diamond, the Steinbergs, who were big then, and the Johnson family. But these were not executives from the corporation. These were the people who actually had the wealth. And they were believing in Dance City Harlem's mission and Arthur Mitchell. That was when I understood the value of what it means to have someone with means believe in your mission, which is different than Mickey Moody and Judy Garland and everybody putting on the show and, we're going to keep it up, which ultimately is not sustainable after a while. But that moment, and that you could then actually talk to that group of people, and that group of people would then say, yeah, we ought to throw an event, and they would just put on a party so we could meet some more people and introduce some more people. That was something that I could not have done except for that rare moment of access, which very often for most nonprofits, they do not have.
So you described the dream board in many ways. Fundraising, governance, civic reach, all kind of in many ways figure into the examples of the instances and insights that you just gave. And I wonder if you could, by way of initiating this role of counsel for the moment to the people who are here today, considering the importance of each of those, what one piece of counsel would you offer in the construction of a board? Whether it's an existing board or a new venture leaping into the fray. And I'm going to ask Kiki to start, Charmaine, and then Ben.
I'd like to play off what Charmaine just said, that giving capacity is a critical piece of a successful board. But, and I'm sure that this was the case with your experience, it's not just enough to be a check writer. You also want people who are also engaged in the mission, which I think if they're writing a check, that would mean they are. But equally important are people who bring a skill set, are thought leaders, and not everyone is going to be as deep a thought leader as the person next to them. But you really want to find people on your board who can add their intellectual power to the conversation to fulfill the mission and to keep the conversation vibrant. And so it's not just being smart, but it's being personality-wise, being good with other people. I mean, again, this is the dream board, right?
Sure.
But I think it's the ideal package would have all of those elements.
You're hinting at kind of carefully curating.
Carefully curating.
And
Exactly.
curating for depth of knowledge, depth of pocketbook, depth of connectivity, and universally the depth of passion.
And plays well with others.
And plays well. Perhaps a bit of advice we could have all day. Charmaine, one bit of counsel to our friends here.
I think it's two things. One, be real clear in what your mission is, so that when you are asking people to come on board, because I sit on the committee of trustees for CalArts, so I get to watch all the names that come through that people are trying to put on board. And, when you're looking at money, often is the driving factor in conversations, but the reality is, does that person feel your mission, your passion? Because when it gets tough, are they going to be there? Two, do they have the time? If they don't have the time, is everybody else on your board going to be really comfortable with the fact that they might not be there, but they will be giving? And the third part is just understand their individual expertise. I always tell my fellow board members at CalArts, I'm your poverty board member, My job is that I bring all of my expertise, and I understand the give-get, so I can't meet the highest volume of it, but I am always gonna give. I'm gonna be the one that's telling everybody there's got to be 100% board giving, that they have got to constantly be engaged in the organization, and then if you don't have the resource at that moment, what is the other resource you can give? So it's resource that your board member can be, and here's the last part of that question. Whose job is it to get those board members? Because I would venture to say that if you're the ED, it's kind of your job, but it's really the board's job, and does your board understand that part of the role? Because otherwise, you could get in this conflict as to who's telling who to do what.
And let me roll this at you in a slightly different way.
Oh, damn, because I had things to say about
Charmaine made me think about this whole trade-off between time and service and money. And it's not just a pure dichotomy, there could be. But is time a substitute for money?
I'm going to back into this with just adding something to what Charmaine said about this issue about the give or get. If you take the current assumptions about how boards behave and are constituted, within the current set of assumptions, I would say that within that school, we need to start saying to people, it's give and get, it's not give or get, because there is a difference just in terms of understanding of an organization and emotional attachment to have to go out and ask, even if you can write the check. And so I think that's one thing. The other thing is the Guthrie Theater, looking back, 20 years ago, really did something I thought was deeply inspirational, and they wanted to diversify their board. And they got away, they eliminated a minimum give-get requirement defined financially, and instead they said, if you're sitting on this board, the check you write to the Guthrie needs to be one of the 4 largest charitable checks you write. So give to your church, give to your alma mater, give to where your mother had cancer and was treated in the hospital, we don't care. But if we're not in your top 4, you don't care sufficiently enough about us to be empowered with determining our destiny. And what that meant was people that were wealthy, those checks were huge, and people that didn't have as much money, those checks were much smaller. But the total board yield skyrocketed, and everybody met around the table with manifested the same degree of commitment to the organization. So this tier second-classness that can happen for big checks versus little checks was automatically eradicated. And I always thought that was an inspiring, different way to think about the give or get. To your question, though, I will say that in the ideal world, I worry that our dependence on the board for philanthropy is deeply problematic. And that really, that, you know, when I think about the great boards, when I think about great corporate boards, you know, Apple's board is 8 people. Target's board is 11 people. Microsoft's board is 9 people. Most $3 million theaters I know have boards of 35 people. And I instantly say, well, what is this? And most of them, when I say, why is your board so big? Is it the right size? They say, well, it depends on what you're talking about. If you're talking about strategy, they're much too big. If you're talking about fundraising, they're much too small. And when people want to say, I need to add more board members because we need to raise more money, is the real litmus test that tells you what they think the board's job is to do. And especially in this moment where organizations are going to have to fundamentally change the way they behave and think, I worry we're recruiting the boards for all the wrong reasons. And this is my soapbox, and I'll promise I'll stop in 30 seconds. But unlike Microsoft, which says, who are the smartest people that can help us solve the strategy of the future, we basically look to the people who are most committed to the way we've behaved in the past. Microsoft doesn't say, or Apple doesn't say, who bought the most iPads last year? Let's put them on the board. But I'm saying really, that's what we do. We say, who attended the most and who gave the biggest check, put them on the board. They love the way you've been. That's why they gave you the big check. If you need to change, they're the people least invested in you doing it different. And so in an odd way, we could be staffing the board with people that are like trying to drive you the emergency brake on. So, to recruit the board, my question would be, I think if you take a board person out and ask them about board service, and the conversation is about, here's what we expect from you if you're on the board, you're having the wrong conversation. I think the conversation to recruit a board, and recruitment's going to be the key issue on this, is the conversation should be, here are 3 major decisions our board reached in the last 3 years, and here are 5 major issues we're going to have to solve in the next 5. How do you think about those issues?
So getting in, diving deep from the start.
Right, in the strategic issues, because the way they think about it will tell you if they're the right people or not. But also, if they're engaged on that level, they're going to be animated by definition in a way that will help them get to those other things you do. But if you start by saying, we need you to write a check and throw it and come to the gala, you've oriented them out of the strategic realm into a functional realm that's going to get you in a lot of trouble.
Super. I sit on the board of an independent school, and one of the great insights for me that I brought out of that experience is that boards require depth executive management. That was intuitive for me, but I'd never seen it done with such exceptional artistry as I'd seen in this school setting. So one of the questions that I have, and I then want to go to the group and let you be counsel to the questions that are now bubbling up in their minds, is what is a CEO's best secret for actually managing the board? So that it operates in service to the mission, and it's not merely boss. Charmaine?
I would probably say, and would not necessarily say I was the absolute best at it, when I think about all of the situations that I've gone into where every one of them was in a crisis set state when I went into that organization to manage it. And again, I've got my ED hat on.
Mm-hmm.
But it would be time that the leader of the organization and the chair of the board actually make the time to spend with their board. It's like raising a child, and I don't mean that pejoratively. If you don't spend any time with that child, they'll grow up, but they'll raise themselves. And before you know it, they got subcommittees over here and this thing over here, and everybody didn't talk to each other. And the hardest thing to do when you are the ED, unless you have enough support staff on the other side, is to devote yourself to the time with your board members in order to have those kinds of conversations.
Which is a strong argument for picking a very peer-to-peer engaged board chair and making sure that they're in a leadership role.
And so that if you're not the one doing it as the ED, your chair is doing it. And you kind of partner with each other to make that happen. And the best relationship I ever had like that was when I first went to Dance City Parliament with my board chair, Charmaine Mills. Oh my God, she was fabulous. But when I think about it, I don't know how she kept her own job. We were on the phone probably every other day, sometimes twice a day. And it was wonderful, because even when I knew what I wanted to do, I'd go, hey, blah, 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 what do you think? Great, hey, that's an additional idea. And it was just magic.
Kiki, does your CEO manage you and your fellow board members?
I think it's, I want to go back to what you said. I think that it gets back to being a partnership. So managing sounds like boss versus employee.
Okay.
But I was trying to think about what the one magical word is, and I think that partnership is a good word, because I was thinking of other words that you put under the umbrella of partnership, like dialogue, like trust. So think of all those things, and on all of those pieces really need to be there to have a healthy, strong partnership.
So it's managing with a communal mindset, that in fact we are a community, and we live in partnership with one another, and there is a utter interdependency that we must share. The one thing that I would add probably in my thinking is, and it's underlying this, is a transparency about this partnership and the importance of it translating to the rest of the board. Do you have a response to the managing question?
Yeah, the only thing I would add is, I think just as Charmaine said about making sure you have significant time together, I think it's about being respectful about maximizing the time you ask them to give you. And what I mean by that is that, especially you see in board meetings, everything that comes before the full board, in my mind, should have an animating question that you need the board to help you solve. if you can't articulate what is it that the board's going to help us figure out that's going to solve this, it can go in a report in the board document that can be mailed in advance. But board meetings that are a numbing, mindless procession of reports without an underlying question that really warrants the full board to be together is a disrespectful use of time. And with all due respect, I think making a transition, there's a chapter of being diligent about this to say, you know, reports are going to go in the board book, and we need you to read them in advance, and we are not going to regurgitate them at the board meeting. And when it's apparent at the first board meeting that some of the people haven't read it, to have the discipline to say, we're not going to go back over that. You can read that again later, but really making it clear, we're in the room, this is what happens live, this is what happens in advance. And that animates board meeting in a respectful way. And I think the contrary is just disrespectful of their precious time.
Hence, great questions like, what makes a great Steppenwolf, and to what end, basically, right?
Yeah.
Those are driving questions in a strategic sense, but a board meeting can have driving questions as well.
On a micro sense as well as a macro sense. But if you don't need them to help you answer the question, why are you taking their time?
Yeah. Super. Well, I would imagine that at this point in the conversation, some questions and thoughts are bubbling up in your minds. If not, we've not done our job up here. So flatter us for a second with your intelligence. Please.
Well, I don't know if I can live up to that. Ben, I think your point about boards being too large is spot on. But my question is, for those of us who've been on grant panels, so much of the conversation is how the board isn't big enough. They shouldn't get funding because they don't have enough board members. How can we change the funders' understanding of why we would need smaller boards in order to continue getting funding?
And just before you answer the question, you modeled what I like the conversation to look like. If you can target your thought or question to a particular board member, to a panel member, terrific. If not, I will, because everybody doesn't need to respond. And we don't have that much time, so we want to use our time well. So that was great modeling.
So I guess I'm a little smart.
I mean, I think it's a great question. I mean, I think well, I don't know how you change funders' minds. Don't get me started. And I count myself among the guilty on that. I mean, I think on one level, the universal truth that most people understand is the addition of every board member is an additional personal relationship to manage. And as Charmaine said, every board member needs care and feeding. And so I think a smart organization will be quite clear about the limits of the numbers of those relationships that can be responsibly managed before it overtaxes and tips the organization into negative problems, I mean, in terms of time and space. So being clear about the limits of that and emphasizing, I think, what we're really all after is about board effectiveness and impact, not board size. And how to really be able to articulate to a funder that a board of this size and structure is able to achieve clear goals you set for your board, and therefore you don't need them to go any further in terms of size, would be, as a funder, the conversation I'd be interested in having with you.
Super.
Can I just,
Please respond, that's okay, and then we'll get the hand that went up over there.
piggyback on this a little bit.
Piggyback.
Part of what you referenced is the ongoing, and I am one of those people that says, it's interesting when you step out of an organization, your ability to want to try and say, yes, here's a problem. And a fundamental problem is, if we do not get funders to start to think differently about access and equity, they will continue to have the expectation, and I'm not saying this is you, the expectation that every nonprofit will function the same way. You have board members who are going to give, they have to have enough money, you need to get more people who have money who can give money to you, and so you end up in this vicious kind of tail cycle. So part of your job is to constantly be able to let them know what your board members can give to you and what the capacity of access is for your particular organization. In this instance, I will say, particularly in communities of color and that are dealing with culturally specific work, or work that's so far off on the edge that you can't get anybody to say it's mainstream enough. Access to wealth limits whether or not you've got a board member who can write the give and get, and I agree with that, or let alone has access to anybody else who has it or hasn't been stretched too far. So just constantly be looking at what is it that each one of my board members is bringing, and tell that story back both to funders and to the board so that they can do, because it is a fundamental thing that has to change, and we're working off old models that are not recognizing the changing way in which organizations are coming up from around and bubbling up as opposed to funded by a wealthy patron.
Love your thought or question?
Yes.
And why don't you identify yourself in any association you have?
Sure. I'm Daniel Hennick, the Artistic Director of the Blank Theater. Hi. I've been running the Blank now for 25 years. And I have sat in a room like this having this discussion more times than I can even remember. And in general, when I see this on a panel, I don't go anymore because it's kind of the same sort of spiral of conversation. But this distinguished panel, I made sure I came today, and I'm glad I did because I've already been inspired in ways that I have never been in the discussion like this. But one of the things that over the years of looking at this and talking about this conversation that has been a huge question for me, I sit on other boards outside of my own organization, but is this, and sorry Paul, but it's actually for all three of them I want to answer.
I'm actually going to just direct it to Kiki.
Okay, the question I have is, because of the nature of us always growing and looking to deepen our commitment to our mission, et cetera, is anyone ever really happy with their board?
Because we don't live in heaven, right? We're not in a perfect world. So there's always, and you know the other thing too is that you may identify someone and go through, maybe if you went through the perfect vetting process, this wouldn't happen. But again, we live in an imperfect world. But you may have identified someone who you think would be a great fit. And then after living together for a year or two, you realize
Engagement, marriage perhaps, but
maybe not. Right. And it's okay if that happens. It's just part of the process of building better. We're always trying to build better boards, I think.
So a board has to also have a way of channeling in and channeling out those folks. Generally, we do that with board terms and limits and that sort of thing. But there have to be ways for groups to allow board members to move on to their better capabilities.
But can I say that question? Sure. Because again, I'm just thinking out loud about this because the board issue to me is the biggest issue I think we face because I really do believe people with good boards are going to be okay and the people with bad boards are going to be in the toilet. And I can't overemphasize it enough. In terms of term limits, I used to believe in them very strongly and as a way to get people in and out. And now I don't anymore. And part of the reason I don't is during the economic collapse, when we watched boards running like Bull Street China shops in panics, people that had been very good about term limits said to me, there is nobody on the board who was here the last time the economy fell, and therefore there's not a peer that can say to them, we don't have to panic. And they can't hear it from the staff. They can't hear it. You know, and so I think it's part of the board's job to be rigorous about board performance and make sure that the dead wood is going and new voices are coming in. But I don't think that's tantamount anymore to board to term limits.
Has that been easy for you to do?
Well, I think it depends on the personality of the leadership. So personally, if someone is not engaged in the mission, then why are they wasting their time? But I think that you have to have the conversation in a way that's respectful of that person's volunteerism.
Sure.
But I think you have, that's the thing about leadership. I mean, you have to have leaders that are willing to take on the tough projects and not just all the fun ones.
Let's hear another voice in the room. I want to get the person at the back, and then I'm going to get you. Go ahead.
Hey, my name is Rita, and I work with Vandeventer Dance Theater here in Los Angeles. So my question may be Charmaine, because it's a South Indian company, you know, people of color, and we face a lot of struggle with access to resources. So, and I'm wondering how to find a board member.
How to find
Where do I find one? Yeah. I guess I can also preface this with, we were in Boston for 16 years and then moved to Los Angeles a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago.
So it's a civic reach question on the part of the people who are running the company, really. What were your secrets of extending yourself out beyond the natural sort of limits of your own social circle?
I think a lot of it has an enormous amount to do with where do you perform, who do you do business with, who are you collaborating with. There are times it will cause you to reach and touch other people if you think about whether or not your mission touches the universe in ways that you weren't thinking about. So as I have found it possible to draw other people in, it's been about not only what does the organization need, but is the organization itself serving as wide a community as it possibly could have, or has it thought too narrowly about its own audience? And I'll give a really quick example. When I stepped into the California African American Museum, it had 50% budget cut, staff cut. It's a state agency, and it has a private nonprofit. So we were running 2 boards, 2 sets of books, 2 sets of staff, and didn't have any of the above. And 7 of the board members are appointed by the governor. So that already tells you. And they're debating whether they have to give money on the foundation side, but they have seats on the foundation board. So that's already just a recipe for. I'm being recorded, so I won't use the word I'm talking about. So here's the deal.
Challenge.
Whatever the situation is that you're in, what I turned to the staff and did was try to start to change the internal thinking structure. So they would say, well, we need to do it like black men, we need to do it like so-and-so. And the conversation was no, and at the time JetBlue was really big. You need to think more like JetBlue instead of American Airlines. How do you shift the paradigm of what we're doing? Instead of you continuing to want to function in silos, I'm a curator, I don't look at marketing, I'm a so-and-so, I don't do this, and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to drop it. Who's the total audience? And out of that, we met more people, different people, other people got interested, including people of different backgrounds, different this, and then you show them how your mission also serves them. So that would be, in some respects, one way that I would say to do it. And the last thing I would say is, obviously, you're going to hear, as the gentleman said, funders say you need more people from corporations, and you need more people from this because they can get you this money. That means you got to look to see what you're doing serves their business purpose. And that then may get you the other side of who else you can go to try to pull from managers, and then make friends with them first. Please do not just go, you're the manager of Target on, La Cienega, and I really think it would be great for you to be on our board, and they've had no relationship with you. It just is deadly.
Curating suggests a length of relationship.
A length of relationship.
And a discernment.
Organization.
And a discernment. And we are lucky enough in Los Angeles to have groups like the African American Board Leadership Institute that has graduated now somewhere on the order of 125 individuals who are ready and trained well to be in service to nonprofit organizations as board members and multi-talented. And they're getting in league these days with groups doing the similar things in the Latino community and the community of Asian Pacifics in Los Angeles, and the 3 of them are partnering up. So that's an additional asset to help you kind of focus on the resources that are available where some kind of advanced curation and training is going on for you. I had this question here.
Okay, so piggybacking on that, because my question has something to do with that. How do we get here in Los Angeles a board match event like they have in San Francisco? And if you have experience of that, do you find those sort of events successful in helping nonprofits reach, and for-profit companies as well, reach the atypical possible board members, the ones that we don't know about, the ones that we haven't shared on other boards? But the people that are in the community that could be advocates for the arts, that want to participate in the arts, but don't know how. They don't know Do you know anything about the board match events?
Let me ask Ben,
I don't know
have
the name you're referring to, I'm sorry.
have you had any experience in funding capacity, not just in arts organizations, but in the community of arts in cities or locales, where you're creating a kind of conversation between those who want to serve and those who would like to recruit, but don't have necessarily all of the resources in place to recruit well? Have you ever been involved in that capacity conversation?
Apart from the business committee for the arts used to have a thing called volunteer lawyers for the arts, which was their attempt specifically to target members of the legal community with specific skills to reach out into the arts community in a different way. That's a very specific and narrow focus, and I think much more specific than what you were talking about. I haven't had experience with that, and we have.
They do it every year in San Francisco. They do a board match event where it's like a convention, and it's publicized everywhere so people can find out about it. They can go through and they meet the different organizations and find out which one they are a match for, which one they, you know, really
so
feel
we
for their
just
programming.
appointed you the chief advocate.
I'm just so
The Los
surprised that this
Angeles
is so
board match.
unknown in Los Angeles.
Call
It's been going on
community
for
partners,
years.
we'll discuss it more.
It's unknown in New York too.
Yeah.
I don't, I think that the funding community would be appreciative of that kind of capacity, and building that kind of capacity. So it might be worth an additional conversation.
Let me just add this thought to this, and it may also piggyback off a part of your question that I'm not sure I absolutely heard until afterward. One of the things that gets asked is board capacity to give, capacity to oversee your financials and understand what the heck you're doing, which is their first responsibility. Because they could say, yes, my job is to oversee your financials, and it's your job to go over here and raise the money, and we'll lead you to some places. I'm going to give you leads, go pursue them, okay, staff. So your other side of your board support is, do you have the staffing capacity to follow up on the board's leads? The other side is the difficult situation that happens so often, and I cannot tell you how many times I'm the only one, okay? And so you can pick which only one. My hair's gray now, so that puts me in another category. Female, black, used to be a dancer, you pick it. And I've also
Lawyer.
And I've also sat on a corporate board and been paid, so of a toy company. So that's a whole different realm. But what I will say is, I'm constantly asked, well, we want to. First off, minority organizations are asked, you should diversify your board, and I will look at them and go, I don't remember you telling any Jewish organization that they need to diversify their board. So sometimes there's a mix, but you need to diversify. Then what happens is, stop and look at where wealth is. Because that is going to tell you right off the bat that Oprah Winfrey can't sit on everybody's board. And yet, I could walk in an organization and get asked that question. Well, have you gone to, why do you think? That's one. Two, if I'm on the board and someone else, how many of them are there to sit on the board to give you that range of diversity with all the other need things that you have? And that's why there's got to be a shift so that it doesn't become a have and have not. Wealthy rule, poverty begs. And so as you think about it, if you were going to do something like a matchup kind of thing, it has a lot to do with the fact that people who have now reached a plateau in their business or their wealth life can serve, but they just not have any connection. And so how do we make that connection with this new group of people who want to serve like that? And that's where I think even I would be interested in engaging in that, because after a while, no matter what you do, you can find yourself running around in the same circle. And it's breaking that circle.
Other voices in the room? Thoughts? Bubbling questions? What have you been dying to ask? What will you think about walking out of this room today as you walk to your car and go, damn, I didn't ask that question?
We
Yes,
still
I
serve
wanna-
on the board.
I just saw Vision.
Identify yourself first, if you don't
Oh,
mind.
sorry, Patrick Owen, Senate Theater Group. And I just saw Vision you wanted to share something, so I wanted to ask what Ben wanted to share. Really.
Piggyback on the top of this, and I'm coming to this a little late in my trajectory from your question, is I think if we think every time someone visits our work, we have the opportunity to have a dialogue with them about not only what they're going to see, but about what we stand for. You know, I lift weights at the YMCA in New York. On the wall, responsibility, respect, integrity. It's in the weight room, it's in the locker room, it's when I check in. I know their values. Most theaters that I go to, I walk in, I see the headshots of the people I'm going to see, I see scenes from what I'm going to see, I go see it, and I go home. And I don't see any pictures of the school programs they do. I don't see anything of the senior citizen outreach they do. I don't see any sense of the articulation of values about what it is they stand for. And around this very conversation around board members, I think these conversations are easier and more open if we're transparent about our values and the reach of what we do every time people encounter our work, because then you've tilled the ground for the conversation. And so, just as a base, because the people that are going to be anxious to serve in your board probably are experiencing the work. A lot of the tilling for the conversation will be richer and easier and more appropriate because people will gravitate to that not because they like Arthur Miller, but because they see an affinity between what you stand for and what they believe in. And those will be the best board members you can get.
And a sign,
That's what went through my mind.
yeah, and a sign that we've built a bit of a community here is you stepped into the moderator role and picked up. And we have a kind of redundancy, so let's keep that going. And deepen your question.
My name is John Dickinson and I'm an independent artist. I have questions about coming into a functioning board already. If you're a new executive director that's coming in, the board has been functioning, how do you as an executive match that board, or if you see changes, how do you as the new person coming in make those changes and make those relationships?
I think you need to dialogue with your chairperson. That's the first thing. And make that person your partner to help you effectuate your vision for your organization.
You're talking about, that's where the bond happens, is between the CEO and the board chair before a board member actually passes through the gate of admission, really, right?
And also you could strategically start having lunches with, get a feel for the board. Get a feel for who are the respective thought leaders. That's kind of a hard thing to do. But so it's not, you want to start, I think, with the chairperson, but you also want to create a network within the board of people who you think are high thought leaders and who can help partner with you.
The team.
The team.
Yeah.
And I'd say just totally pragmatically, it's sort of a mutual responsibility. Number one is maybe because I am an excellent waiter, as people will tell you from the restaurants where I used to work, I've always had the conviction that if I'm in a job search, everything's on the table, and I'm going to tell you everything. And I'm not going to pretend to be somebody I'm not, because there are no surprises. You know, so in the search process, around some of this, I think for the candidates, there's an obligation of authenticity that can be easy to bypass because you're afraid, oh, I better not let them know. A. B, from the organization's point of view, what I've seen that works the best is the head of the search committee should be the next board chair. Because if the head of the search committee who's chosen you is the next board chair, your champion is already at the top of the board. And what I've seen is it's a lot of dysfunction is somebody says, I'm going to run the search committee, it's the last thing I'm going to do, and then I'm going to walk out the door, and here comes the executive director. The biggest champion's not even on the board anymore. So thinking thoughtfully about board succession and tying that to the search function really helps an organization make that change.
Keep this going. Others? Thoughts? Yes, sir.
Well, I'll let you choose my respondent.
Identify.
I'm Brian Kite. I'm the artistic director of La Mirada Theater for the Performing Arts. What about boards that are too engaged? So we've talked Where is that level? How do we address it? How do you deal with that? Sometimes a board can literally take every moment of the executive director's time with phone calls and ideas and thoughts and day-to-day management of the organization. And Kiki, you talked about a board that, with the Philharmonic, who just said, let's get the very best staff, let the professionals run this organization, and we'll do something else. And you talked about a very engaged board, although I think their mission was clear. Can you talk a little bit about dealing with that issue, where you want to stop that, and how you manage?
Have you
Well, and I've had both extremes in the same organization, and I won't say which one. And interestingly enough, when someone asked me when I was walking in, I said, this is kind of like Christ and the Antichrist. You don't know which way it's going to go for you at any given time. It almost piggybacks off of this. If from the beginning, whether you're coming in or you have the chance to shake the board or whatever, you can get them to buy into the idea that their job is not necessarily to do the mission, but to help give you feedback about how you are engaging in the mission, then that'll be the first issue. The second part of it comes when, why are they overly engaged? Is it because you're having a fiscal problem and what just got described, which is that there's nobody around anymore, and so they all think we should run because it's the fiscal crisis of the day? But if you can identify why, then you can help to gear it. And even I, as a board member, will find that there are times I'm sitting in the board meeting, I'm listening to what's going on, I go, oh, I can help with this, and I pick up the phone and I go, Steve Levine, the president of Calico. Steve, do you need me to do so and so, so and so, so and so, so and so? And then I'll stop and then I won't say anything more about it after that. And I don't hold him if he doesn't get back to me, because I realize it's like if he needs it, he'll do it, and if not, but I want him to just know I'm there. But then I also have times I have to stop myself from doing that, because he really doesn't know what the heck he's doing. And if he needs me, he probably will pick up the phone and call and say, I need you for X, Y, or Z. So even as a board member, I have to find myself at times balancing that particular issue.
And it sounds like a CEO needs to set the limits and work with the chair on what the limits are to engagement. One, if it detracts from staff time to do the work of the organization, that can get in the way. But the CEO in concert with the chair sounds like they're the ones whose task it is to set that tone.
One of the things actually I just read recently is that it is, and I forget who wrote this, but it's the board chair's responsibility to manage his or her board. At the end of the day, that's a board issue. So if you have board members who are micromanaging, I was going to say before, that often is because there's a lack of trust in staff. That could be completely not valid, but for whatever reason, they're not trusting staff. Maybe there needs to be better dialogue. Maybe there have been some challenging issues that people are just afraid, and they need not just dialogue, but maybe more explanation about that the staff is being proactive to deal with those issues. But at the end of the day, if there's a problem, it's the head of the board that needs to, ultimately the buck stops there.
One more question.
Can I also just say, I'm the chair of LA Stage and I have board members in the room, I'm not talking about that. I need you engaged right now. Overly engaged.
Well, yes. Question from the gentleman at the top. Identify yourself.
John Rivera, Director of Playwrights Arena. The last 5 years, I've had the best board group that I've ever had in the 23 years of Playwrights Arena. Mainly because I found somebody who was really engaged in our mission and had resources, which bumped up everybody's level of commitment, because she was always upfront with, I want to help here, I want to do this, let's expand this. Then the other board members came up to that level, and even though, like you said, I mean, there are many levels of wealth in the group, but people who didn't even have anything, well, I can do the printing, and I can do this, and they stepped up to that level. The one thing that just recently came up to me with my board member, which was really a great question, he said, I need a real direction of what you want from me that I can really help you with. And it's not for any artistic director or any person that is leading an organization, the easy answer is I need you to find more money. But it's finding a way to ask that question without saying, give us or find more ways of money. Try to really figure out a way to give them a job, a responsibility, or a direction of, you could help us if we could find a way to reach out to this community, or whatever it is that would be helpful. But it's interesting that that question only came up recently because somebody wanted to step down, and I asked why, and he felt like, there wasn't really enough of need from him, which was so interesting because I always felt like when we sat down at board meeting, there's always a need for more audience, more money, more development, more. But it's something that's very specific to each of them, which is what I am so encouraged and inspired to hear about your thoughts, because I feel like we need to really be clear about what we want from our board, and not just say we need more money, but literally have a plan of, if you can help me get to this audience or help me to get in ways that is not about we just need more money. So
what a lovely summation of an experience with the board. And let me ask the board, the panel, I keep wanting to be one more, the panelists, by way of wrapping up today's conversation, reflecting on that lovely example of a board rising to the exemplar on the board, in fact, and of the organization benefiting as a result, and this gentleman being able to report 5 years of the best experience of his life. Taking away from today's conversation what you've heard, tell us closing thoughts on how you would respond to him, but how that might be generalized to everyone's experience of their board so that they have exactly the same experience.
So I'll start, Charmaine. First off, on behalf of all of the people who are board members, both here and elsewhere, it's a thank you to that kind of a comment, but particularly to say that all of our organizations are in service. We are charities, in service to the public. Sometimes we forget. We think it's about our own masturbatory experience. And if we remember that there are a cadre of people who support us. Sometimes it's their membership dollars, it's their last check, it's their volunteers, but it's that your board members are volunteers. And they're giving their time. And if you just keep reminding yourself of that, even when it feels difficult, it's much easier to stop and go, okay, yeah, this person is still volunteering to me. And I need to give something back so they know their value. So that's what I took from what you said, and that's the experience that I'd like to see us walk away.
And that every board member is an individual, and that the better you know each individual, the better you can help them feel engaged as board members. Because not everybody will have the same touch points. As we discussed earlier, you have a mission that may resonate differently with different board members, and you need to have that open line of communication so you can identify with each individual on your board what they're passionate about. And it may not be the same for everyone.
Yeah. That comment reminds me of two things. Number one, I remember Michael Kaiser, who ran the Kennedy Center, once saying, I try to engage each of my board members deeply in one thing. I don't try to invest them deeply in everything, which I thought was really smart advice. But the second thing about this, sometimes I think when we talk about boards, it can feel like mystical or whatever, but one thing this conversation has reminded me of is from the days I used to direct, we know how to cast. We know how to make a cast. And it's not always about you're casting this actor because they're the best actor you've ever seen. It's because we need the cast as a whole to do this. And then what's the work you as a director do to animate the fullest work potential that each of those actors can bring to the composite that you've created. And sort of that composite sense of casting suddenly makes this feel more doable to me than how do I find a CEO? To your question at the end, I guess the thing I hear is we need to be attentive to monitoring how our board members are participating going forward. And sometimes that means you've got to draw people out in meetings. But the other thing is you can never say thank you too much. And you can never say thank you specifically too much. I don't mean only that by person, but thank you for the time you told us this in the meeting. Thank you for your role in bringing this person. Because generally, we sometimes forget the wealth of what they bring to us. And God, I'll start where I ended up. We owe every board member in this room infinite thanks for doing the work you do and providing your time and energy and resources. And I'm saying this in general, but if your executive directors were here, they could tell you in specific what I'm talking about. So thank you all.
One measure of a great engaged board member is they stick around, they stay attentive, they listen, and then they engage more. One sign of a good conversation is when people stick around. No one left the room today. I don't want to no one left the room because these three people had a lot to offer. If they offered you something, thank them.